Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight I thought I'd jump right into what I wanted to talk about, and that is be very, very careful who you date. Now, I've done other videos about relationships and, just dating relationships and other relationships, how they affect your life and how they can really make or break your future. But I wanted to share a little bit of personal experience from my life that actually has guided me along the way. I guess you could say, in some ways, red pilled me. Uh, I'm in my mid 40s and I was divorced a long time ago. And I had kids from the marriage and went through a whole situation where I did not understand all the legal, the way things were legally shifting at the time to where uh, basically, if you're not really careful, you will get fleeced, especially as a man, big time. And I mean, financially, just get utterly destroyed by them in a way that will still affect you years down the road. To this day, to some degree, thankfully, I'm mostly, able to keep most of the money that I make. I'm debt free. I'm starting other businesses and doing everything. But uh, the way it red pilled me and woke me up, I can't begin to tell you how much of that really changed me and just woke me up to how different things are in relationships. And this was already happening years ago. I mean, online stuff was becoming a thing, and people being able to cheat with somebody online was just becoming a thing. Um, but you have to be very, very careful who you date and what that can potentially do to your life. I went through a situation where the person that I was with had been involved in church with me. We had raised our children in church together, and inevitably, in the end, discovered that this person was committing alimony fraud. And then I proceeded to discover that the court would not allow me to simply testify that she had another guy involved living with her, and she refused to even answer as to whose child she was pregnant with, because it clearly wasn't me. I had had a vasectomy towards the end of our marriage, and there was no way the child was mine, and I wasn't involved with her anymore. We weren't involved in that way anymore at all, leading me to eventually have to go through multiple different attorneys, multiple different court dates where I sat in there and I watched people who had had prenuptial agreements completely dismantled and the man completely screwed over. And don't get me wrong, this is not a woman hating type of video. This is simply stating the way that it was. But most of the time, it was men completely screwed over and being forced to pay women that had actually flat out cheated on them. And there was no denying that they had. In fact, they were pretty much admitting it. And the system glazed it over, made the men pay for it. There were instances where I was in there where women were being forced into situations where they were being forced to pay. Some of them were even taken out of the courtroom unable to pay in handcuffs. So when I say to you, be very, very, very careful who you date and who you get involved with, this sort of thing even has been bleeding out of the marriage, the sphere of marriage and into private relationships with people where if there's common law marriage where you live or they've got other children involved in the situation, there's a lot of ways that it can very negatively affect you. As for me, ultimately, I ended up having to finally find an attorney that would help me fight everything, getting a private investigator, proving that she was living with him, involved with him on a financial level, and had had kids with him, basically proving she had committed alimony fraud and had been completely dishonest. I still ended up having to pay part of the alimony. Despite all the legal fees, despite all the trouble, I had to pay to somebody who was involved with another person who had been completely dishonest about the whole situation. I still have to pay for it. And yeah, there are days where that really grates on me, but you have to learn to accept that there are some things you're never going to escape. And there were some red flags and signs and things that I did that I shouldn't have done myself. But that means that all of you out there can learn to watch your backs when you get involved in these situations, and maybe you can learn something from what I went through. So, expanding upon that, as I went forward into future relationships, uh, I I began to notice that if there were certain toxic traits and certain things that were happening, like any type of lying, they aren't going to lie to you about something that doesn't matter. They're never going to tell you a lie about something that isn't going to affect your relationship, because why lie about it? The only time they're going to tell you a lie is if there is something that is genuinely going to affect the relationship, and they know it is. That's why they're going to lie about it. So if you catch them lying, that is absolutely a red flag that you should not ignore. Now, I'm not talking about they might have misremembered something, or it is something genuinely that doesn't matter. But if they can't say, if they have missing blocks of time and they're lying about it, or they're telling you they went home and took a nap and they went to some place where somebody they used to be involved with was, and you end up finding out that they lied about that situation, and then they claim, oh, I didn't see that person while I was there, or I wasn't involved with them while I was there. Well, realistically, how can you believe that? You don't want to risk your future and tying yourself up emotionally, financially, and in all other ways. You don't want to do that and have them drain huge portions of your life just to find out in the end you were being lied to the whole time. You have to recognize those signs right up front. So there's no reason for them to be lying to you about anything. There just isn't. And they should be risking and the chance of telling you the truth no matter what, because if they're willing to do that, then they might be a keeper. Other things that you'll notice is extreme amounts of pressure being put on you. Things should just kind of happen naturally. I had one other situation that was just very, very bad, where I ended up, I mentioned in some of the other videos, I've done film work, acting, and worked with women that had done modeling and acting and other things like that. Well, somebody that had connected through that had started dating me at one point, and this was over the course of, it wasn't even very long. I'd say it was about 7-8 months that we were dating, and she was wanting it to get serious, which is normally a good thing, but there were a bunch of things from her past that weren't settled. A bunch of questions that just kept popping up, where I discovered one lie after another, and I began to realize, okay, I don't know how the guy that was involved in this lie is still connected in your life, because you're keeping it as shady as you can. And on top of all of that, anytime that I would try to set a healthy boundary, reset it back to something where I felt like, like things were going the right direction and we were doing well, none of it would work. None of it would work at all. She would get very upset. She would be belligerent with me. She would be demanding. Ultimately, that culminated in me having to say, look, I think that this is not a good situation for us to move forward to, and we definitely should never consider something like getting married, because it's abundantly clear to me I'm going to end up in another divorce, and that is the last thing that I need. And upon learning this from me and being told this, and me trying to walk it back instead of attempting to work together with me to straighten this out or fix anything about it or address what the concerns were with me, it got even more belligerent, even more demanding. You need to propose. You need to do all this stuff. It was push, 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 push. Ultimately, I said, look, I think we need to go our own separate ways. Sensing that maybe there was, some real emotional, mental, and just all sorts of instability going on. And that was when the real nightmare started, where I began to have my family and friends harassed, people that I worked with in film and regular business work harassed, had to get legal representation. Apparently it's a felony if you are harassing somebody electronically across state lines. And mind you, I'm going to be perfectly transparent with everyone here. This was simply because I told somebody I didn't want it to move forward into something serious, because I wasn't happy with the way things were going. And when you tell somebody something like that and they can't process that and work with you, but then go into attack mode and become, vicious, cruel, they start harassing you, start harassing family and friends to the point to where they make you so wary of them that you don't ever want to even see them again. You don't ever want to ever be around them again. And I did everything in my power to make sure that that never happened. And it spent about a good year dealing with this individual popping up. She was making fake accounts, attempting to harass me through those, contacting people that I knew, attempting to try and get them to turn against me. One way that I managed to stave that off, and this might be something that could help should you ever find yourself in this situation, is I was contacted by a lady, an older woman, and her husband that I've worked with in film stuff for years, and had been in multiple projects with them. And they contacted me and they said, well, your ex is talking to us and saying that you said all these terrible things about us. And I said, well, tell my ex this, that I wish her well and I hope she genuinely finds happiness one day. And they turned around and sent that back to her. Whatever it was she said back to them was so toxic and full of venom that they came back, immediately sided with me and cut her off, which I suspected would probably happen, because that's what happens when somebody who's that twisted, and I hesitate to use the word narcissistic, but because really that needs to be diagnosed by somebody who's a professional, not just, somebody out here just making a snap judgment on it. But going back and wishing them well and being big enough to walk along and walk away, that person, the person you broke up with or ended things with, or that you're dealing with that, they'll probably never completely understand that, probably never understand it. Everybody else around you is going to take note of the fact that that's the stance you're taking and realize exactly who's who. Everybody that found out about that situation immediately knew who I was and immediately knew who she was, entirely based upon what she was up to and what I was up to. And that makes all the difference in the world, swaying people not by manipulation, but simply by the truth. If that's how you really are, and that's how you really stand, and that's how you react to the situation, they can't help but notice you're the one they want to keep around, and the other person is somebody they probably shouldn't listen to. So it robs them of the ability to keep spreading the insanity and the venom and the poison and everything that they're trying to do. And eventually down the road, I began to realize, as I heard other men, heard other women, mostly began to get red pilled, I stumbled across some information from Jordan Peterson where he began to describe how certain women that do that have narcissistic tendencies, will do this through reputation destruction. They can't physically come at you and attack you and break you down and tear you apart. So they try to destroy your reputation. And the devastating effect of it, at least for a period of time until I finally got past it. And this was reaching out to everybody. She contacted family members of mine she didn't know, had never met, contacted all sorts of people that I worked with in multiple different industries that she didn't know. And in many cases, as a fake account, pretending like she was somebody who had somehow ran into me at one point and was now warning people. And they began to let me know, oh yeah, this sounds like the same person. And it turns out it was. All coming from the same IP address. I got an attorney involved and we did some digging, and that's how we found out. So, long story short, it is very, very important to be very careful who you date, especially who you marry. And just to clarify, I've actually had somebody in my life now for several years that we communicate really well. We're very happy together. There's, looks like a very good future together. And I'm very appreciative of that. And the distinction between the bad stuff, the red flags that you see, which I hate, I even hate that term now because everybody claims that everything's a red flag. Somebody smelled funny one day and now it's a red flag. The distinction between real red flags and things that are actually make somebody a keeper. If you can communicate with them, because no one's going to come into your life, you or them, completely ready for a relationship that's going to work. You're going to have to communicate, figure out your boundaries, figure out something that's healthy, and figure out a way to not have anything that is deceptive or dishonest towards each other. Are you really going to build a life? Because if you can't ask hard questions and they're scared of that, that person's out. You're not going to build a future with them. You might have some fun with them, and then you have to kind of morally and in many other ways kind of justify to yourself whether or not that's the type of thing you want to be doing, is sleeping around, because guarantee you're gonna line up a lot of people that will then get mad at you and say he used me and then he dumped me, and they're not really lying at that point. You did use them and dump them. If you engage in that sort of behavior and then act shocked at the result, that's just idiotic. Just is. So finding somebody that you can communicate directly with and say, here's the boundaries, here's what I expect, and this is what we're both going to do. And if we're not both going to do it, then let's not try this because it won't work. So no acting like you're single when you're in a relationship. And that, just apply that very simply. Don't act single when you're in a relationship. If you're going to go out and do something where you're going to be dancing all up on people at bars and clubs and doing all that sort of thing, it's a likely chance that, especially with alcohol involved, you're going to end up sleeping around. You're going to end up violating that relationship. You should be doing that with the person you're dating, not strangers. And if you're both going out and doing that, then neither one of you really cares about each other anyway, because if you really cared, would you be out there doing that? Ask yourself the hard question. Don't dodge it. Ask yourself the hard question. Second of all, whatever it is that you want to justify doing in the relationship, if it's something that might upset the other person, flip it completely around and ask yourself, are you okay with it being done to you? So if you want to justify going on some sort of trip where you're going to end up in a bunch of really questionable situations, imagine they're going to go on that same trip with another group of people without you. And if there's even a hint inside of you that says, wait a minute, I don't think I like this, that is your own heart. That's the Holy Spirit. That's God telling you, do not do this. That's your conscience saying, stop what you're doing right here. If you're not okay with having it done to you, don't ever justify doing it. It's really, really simple. You flip it around, you'll always know the answer almost immediately. So anyway, that's really all I got for tonight, and I look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's keep this community going. I want to connect with more people that are just like-minded in all of this, and keep things growing, because we need to have a support system. More than anything these days, as much as people are separated from each other, we need a support system. And I'll look forward to talking to all of you soon. Have a good night.